Hello everyone, welcome to Random Encounter 246 or 246. My name is Jono, Logan, and we are on the tail end of a great holiday weekend for many of us. Hopefully it was a good one for you. I had some fun, just online, and I saw a video that's very old, and I've never seen it before, of, I think it's a San Diego fireworks show, and they set off 7,000 fireworks at once at the same time accidentally in 2012. So a 17-minute show was 30 seconds long, and it's one of the funniest internet videos I've ever seen. It was amazing. I would love to go to a fireworks show like that, providing that I had earplugs. But I am not alone today. Joining us on this episode of Random Encounter are Des Miller.
Yellow.
And Dom Kim.
Oh, hello.
Did either of you, Dom, let me see here. So I had a good Canada Day, because then that was July 1st. The 4th of July was, as of this recording, yesterday. Des, did you have a good 4th of July?
For the most part, aside from all of the explosions at midnight, it's been pretty great.
I was up till 2 in the morning on Canada Day playing a video game, and when I went to bed, Amanda was dead asleep, and I get into bed, and all of a sudden, just fireworks go off, like all of them at the same time. Again, kind of like the San Diego fireworks thing. I figured that someone had like fireworks left over, and they were like, oh, might as well fire off all of them at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that was fun. And Dom, I know that you celebrate neither Canada Day nor Independence Day, but you are on, summer break, right?
Indeed, I am enjoying it quite well so far.
That's like a giant holiday weekend.
Yeah, you could think of it that way.
Exactly, it's lovely. We just had Canada Day, Independence Day, I guess summer holiday. But realistically speaking, for gamers, the biggest holiday, holiday is Nintendo Direct Day. And these are never regular, but we knew we were going to get one by the end of June. And surprise, surprise, we got one just after the last episode of Random Encounter went up. So I still wanted to talk about it because there was some amazing, news and things like that. This was not a first-party Nintendo Direct, so we didn't get any news about Breath of the Wild 2 or anything, but it was focused on third-party. It was a mini, so it's not like their giant one. But for RPG fans and adventure game fans, and holy crap, there was a lot of stuff shoved into this Nintendo Direct for us. So I just want to talk about it for a bit. The first thing they really did a highlight on was Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Now, we're going to be doing a deep dive into that game in just a few minutes, so we're not going to talk about that there. But I know both of you have been playing it constantly. Did that little tease wet your whistle for Sunbreak?
Yeah. It was a good way to hype myself up a couple of days before release. Even though I did play the demo a tiny bit, so I guess it wasn't like a completely new thing. But it was still a good way to hype things up, I think.
For me, it just made the wait a lot harder because I got to play the demo a little bit as well. And then when you get the teaser of here's more that's not even in the demo yet, it was just like, it's so close, I want it.
Yeah, they did a lot of announcements of just just tons of stuff. It's amazing to me. It really says how high Monster Hunter's star has risen, that it got such a prominent spot in the Nintendo Direct, and people just, they're loving this game.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll talk about all that in a minute. Let's talk about some of the other big announcements from the Nintendo Direct. Nier Automata, the End of Yorha edition. I think I'm saying that right. That's the fun part about Nier. You're never quite sure if you're pronouncing anything correctly. Or if you're not really paying attention, haven't memorized the entire number at the end.
That's true.
Yeah. So this is coming out on the Switch, and I feel like Nier Automata is the kind of game that would translate really, really well to the handheld nature of the Switch. Have either of you played Nier Automata?
Indeed, I have multiple times, even though it's been some time since my last playthrough of it.
Well, this might be an excuse for another one.
It's one of my favorite games, and the last time I played it was kind of testing the, how it ran on the PS5. So it's going to be interesting to see how it runs on this Switch.
Yeah.
You know what? I have an odd feeling it's probably not going to run as well as it does on the PS5.
There's a chance. They just got to knock down the resolution to like 140 maybe.
Yeah, and 10 frames a second. That'll be perfect. It's one of those games that, frankly speaking, I'm surprised. I didn't think we'd see it on the Switch. I thought we might see it on like the Super Switch or the Switch Pro or the Switch 2 or whatever the follow-up to it was. I wasn't expecting to see this one come out on Switch, so it was a nice surprise, and it looks like it's coming with a lot of extra content and stuff. So if you are a Switch owner and you have always looked at Nier and been like, I want to play that, but you never have, your opportunity is coming fast.
Might this be another start of another Skyrim where Nier gets ported onto every system?
Nier gets installed in a toaster.
There'd be an unironic beauty to that if it's like able to run on your smart fridge.
I mean, it's a game that is, I got it for Christmas. So that got added to, I bumped it up my backlog quite a bit. So it's going to be on there. I don't need it on Switch because I have it on PC, and I'm not going to buy it on 2 systems unless I really, really love it. I only ever buy. Okay, do you guys do this too? Like, if I adore a game, like if I just absolutely love a game, will you buy it on more than one system if that system offers something different? Like for me, Switch, it's portable. So to me, buying a port for the Switch is a value that I am willing to, it's something I'm willing to spend on.
Yeah, but I usually in the past I did that for multiplayer games because I would have friends who would only play on the console and friends who would only play on the PC. So if the game was on sale for like PC or on the console, I would usually try and pick up a second copy of it there.
For me, it depends on what the game is. Like for the Atelier games, I buy them on as many platforms as I can just to kind of support the series.
Mm-hmm.
But for like multiplayer games, like fighting games, there's especially in the past, there's been no like cross-platform play. So you'd have to buy it on Xbox to play with some friends over here, and then buy it on PC to play over there, buy it on PS4 to play over there. So it does kind of depend. But I do have I think 7 copies of Resident Evil 4. So every time it gets ported, I pretty much have to buy it at this point.
And there's a remake coming out for it soon, isn't it?
Yes, sometime next year. I believe March 2023.
Ooh. I was very surprised when they announced it because they just did the VR version of Resident Evil 4 a while ago.
Mm-hmm.
But I think, and for my money, it's been a while since I played them, but for my money, Resident Evil 4 is the only one of the earlier games that actually still holds up as well as it did when it was first released.
Yes, that is very true. I actually played it a couple months ago, and it's surprisingly still a very palatable experience, even on PC.
Yeah, certainly more so than 1, 2, or 3.
It has.
So I was surprised when they announced the remake, and then what your conversation here I was thinking, oh, I know what's going on. Capcom wants to release this version for the next 20 years on every possible platform as well.
And that's another 7 copies I'll have to buy.
It's it looks interesting. I haven't seen enough of it yet to want to play it as compared to the original, but we'll see if they expand it to the same extent that they expanded RE2.
Mm-hmm.
I think RE3 remake actually had less content than the original, which was a shame. But speaking of Capcom revisiting legacy games, they are releasing something that surprised a lot of people, and in a very good way, which is Mega Man Battle Network Legacy Collection. Battle Network was a spin-off series of Mega Man for the Game Boy Advance and the DS. It was on portable for many years and many games. And they're releasing this Legacy Collection. And holy crap, there are a lot of games going to be coming out in this. So it's going to be Battle Network 2, Battle Network Blue and White, Battle Network Red Sun, Blue Moon, Mega Man Battle Network 5, Mega Man Battle Network 6. Like, there's a lot of friggin' games coming out in this package.
Mm-hmm.
Have either of you played the Mega Man Battle Network? Any of them, really? It's a game series that I missed out on, despite the fact that I adore Mega Man.
I haven't seen any of them, I've seen them, but I haven't played them. All I've ever seen are like the screenshots of all the like really terrible / really amazing puns, like H2O2, the sequel to Water, and they always seem like really charming and really fun games. I just never really got around to them. But the thing that surprised me most is that there's 10 of them. I thought there were 2.
Yeah, there was a lot of these games for, pretty much every handheld system. Every handheld system with the name Nintendo on it had these things. It's crazy how many games are going to be, it's going to be a really, really great value.
Yeah, I can't argue with that, even though it seems a lot of them seem to be, like numerically it only goes up to 6, but like 4 and 5 have like 2 variations each. So
yeah,
5 and 6, yeah.
It seemed like they kind of did the Pokemon thing of releasing 2 versions of one game, but I'm not exactly sure how that works. But this collection here will kind of be my first foray into the Battle Network games, and kind of excited because I'm not a huge Mega Man fan, but it's the battle system and all of the humor and the world just seems amazingly interesting, and I'm excited for this to come out.
Yeah, I mean, God only knows what could be next. Maybe they'll release Mega Man Legends 1 or 2 again. I know our fearless leader, Mr. Salvato, would be very happy if that was announced. So yeah, that's going to be another one of those insane value packs of games, kind of like the Metro or the Castlevania Advanced collection that got released a while ago. The announcement that got me going the most in this, even though I knew it was coming already, is Return to Monkey Island. So Switch is going to be the exclusive console, so it'll be doing a Switch PC release, but it won't be on anything else for a little while. And this actually had quite a bit of controversy this week online, because the internet is a happy, wonderful place where fans celebrate games instead of tearing them down. So the discourse about the graphic style of Return to Monkey Island got so bad that it drove off some of the developers from the internet.
No.
Yeah. It drives me friggin' crazy, because
About
I mean, given
style?
on the art style of Return to Monkey Island, because what they wanted, I assume, they either wanted pixel art in the style of Monkey Island 1 or Monkey Island 2, LeChuck's Revenge, or they wanted a return to the like Disney animated style of Curse of Monkey Island. And what they got instead is very, very stylized art, which in my opinion kind of looks beautiful and I think is going to be gorgeous when it's released. But you know, gamers want what gamers want, and if they don't like how something looks, they're vocal about it, sometimes to the extent of ruining it for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, the graphical style, I mean, it's not my style, but it still certainly has a lot of charm to it.
I will say it's a choice. Like, I can totally get how someone could look at it and be like, whoa, this is Monkey Island? Really? But then again, take a step back, guys. It looks good and the talent is there and they're going to tell the story. And it looks like, based on what I've seen, it actually does look like it's going to be, people were speculating that it was going to be only a sequel to Monkey Island and Monkey Island 2, and it was going to ignore Curse of Monkey Island, Escape from Monkey Island, and the Telltale Adventure games. But it looks that's not going to be the case. It looks like it's going to be a sequel to all of them. Murray, the evil demonic skull, is there, and he was introduced in Curse of Monkey Island. So I am very excited for Return to Monkey Island. It's been a long time since I played a Monkey Island game, and I adore them. Have either of you played Monkey Island in the past?
Unfortunately, I've not. Even though it always definitely has been like one of those games I've known about, but I've just never gotten around to playing them, fortunately.
For me, I haven't played them, but I've seen them played. My uncle used to play a lot of PC games back in the day, like Warcraft 2 and some D&D game that was black and white that I can't remember the name of. So I've always just kind of associated it with my uncle for some reason. So when I look at Monkey Island, I think of him, and I'm like, he played a lot of strange games. Never played them myself, but looking at the art style for this one, like, it seems pretty nice. And so I think once people get their hands on it, it'll kind of, show its charm and style a little better than, videos and screenshots can do. But I mean, personally, and looking at the screenshots of the Telltale ones, I think this looks better than the Telltale ones for sure.
Yeah, the Telltale ones, how do I put this? The Telltale ones look like a Telltale game from that period. It's, they look okay, but like Telltale had a definite art style, and their engine, it looks like a Telltale game. And I liked the story, and I liked a lot of the puzzles and the characters. I did not much care for the control scheme, which was like a hybrid movement point and click adventure game and moving with the mouse. It was a very weird hybrid combination that wasn't my cup of tea. So I'm thrilled that they're going back to traditional adventure game style, and I'm very excited for this game. I will not be getting it on the Switch. I'll be getting it on the PC so I can play it with a mouse. Some of the other games that got announced, well, not announced, but they got highlighted, is another sequel, Mario plus Rabbids Sparks of Hope. So this is the follow-up to the previous Mario and Rabbids strategy RPG game, which we covered. This is tangentially in our coverage. We covered the first one, so we're going to cover this one too, because they're just a lot of fun. Have either of you played Mario plus Rabbids?
I have not, actually, but I have always enjoyed the Rabbids series side of things. They've been around. They've just been something.
They've been here for a while.
Yeah. So they've just kind of, I just enjoy the general aesthetic of it, of the Rabbids series. So maybe I'll get around to playing it, but I just haven't, played any of them so far.
I haven't played the Mario and Rabbids series, but since they're kind of based on that XCOM style, and I had a lot of fun with the XCOM style games like Troubleshooter, for example, I've always wanted to see more developers experiment with it and just be weird with it. So Mario and Rabbids, the first one, looks like really interesting, and I've always wanted to try it out, just never got around to it. I'm also a fan of the Rabbid versions of characters, so seeing like Rabbid Mario and Rabbid Luigi and Rabbid Peach, it's always amusing, and with the antics that they get up to, it adds a little bit of chaos to characters that we already know. So it seems like really interesting, really fun, and maybe they'll put out a double pack that I can get for fairly cheap and give these games a whack.
It'd be nice. I haven't played through the whole thing. I've played some of it, and I enjoyed it, actually. It's like you said, it's a pretty good spin on the XCOM strategy game, but with like more elements of RPGs introduced, and it's Mario, and it's a very unique use of the IPs that I was surprised when the first one came out. I was even more surprised when they announced a sequel, but a lot of people are really looking forward to it. So I'm looking forward to seeing more about the game. Another game that got, well, not announced, but much more footage was Dragon Quest Treasures. And I gotta be honest, I'm not entirely certain what this is. Like it's starring Eric and Mia from Dragon Quest XI, which, I think Eric is one of the better characters in Dragon Quest XI. I think I'm on record as not, I'm very much in the minority about not loving Dragon Quest XI. But Eric was one of my preferred characters in that game. So the idea of these two going on like a treasure hunt together is an intriguing one. And it looks really, really cute. It's going for a little bit more of a cartoony style where Eric and Mia look more like kids than their adult selves. And it looks like Dragon Quest. So this is a game that I think could be pretty fun, actually.
It looks pretty fun, but I also kind of have no idea what the game is. When it comes to Dragon Quest, I've only beaten 2 of them. I've beaten Dragon Quest 1 and Dragon Quest 11, so I've kind of bookended the series in a sense. And
there's a few games between those two.
Just like 1 or 2. I own a bunch, but I haven't unwrapped them yet.
Mm-hmm.
So for 11, I liked it. There are some things that I didn't like, but that's more about like structure and the Act 3 kind of stuff. So something that kind of focuses a little more on, at least from what I can tell, the lighthearted, fun nature of like the 2 siblings treasure hunting. That seems like it would be ripe for just all kinds of antics and like just fun gameplay overall. But still, just looking at the trailer, it's hard to pinpoint just what exactly this is going to end up being. But I'm definitely looking forward to it and want to see more.
I'm very sad that Retro Encounter has already done a spoiler cast episode of Dragon Quest XI years ago, and probably won't do another one. I say that, but it's Solosia and it's Dragon Quest, so God knows it might happen. Because I would like to go on that. I would love to go on, have a good conversation about Dragon Quest XI with people who passionately love it, and just talk about the game and talk about its structure and why I think some of it really works and is extraordinarily effective, and some of it is just, like, in my opinion, the last chapter, terrible.
Yeah, like everything leading up to that was some of the highest points, and there were some events that happened and some character growth, and it was just amazing, just really strong, kind of bring a tear to the eye to see how far, certain characters go and how they change, and then things happen.
So Dragon Quest Treasures looks like it could be interesting. There were a few other announcements in this Nintendo Direct, but I think the big announcement that people expected, but at the same time was a little bit surprising based on how visually stunning this game is and whether or not it could even run on the Switch. Persona is finally coming to the Nintendo Switch. They announced that Persona 5 Royal is going to be coming later this year, and Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden will be coming sometime after that. This was kind of following an announcement that these games are going to be coming to other platforms such as PC, which, holy crap, I'm excited about, and Xbox and a few others. So Switch is getting them too. And I think it's a really, really good fit for the Nintendo Switch. And not just because Nintendo is the traditional home of Shin Megami Tensei.
It's true. I'm surprised it took them this long, honestly, for Persona to get ported over to the Switch.
I think Atlas finally woke up and realized they do like money.
Yeah.
What has been interesting is when this was first announced for the Xbox and Windows Game Store and nothing else at the time, it was a little baffling at first because it's like, well, you finally ported it to other systems, but it seemed like they were locking it down to like Game Pass and Xbox, and then more information kind of rolled out, and there was that little gap in all of the logos where Switch would fit nicely, and you could hear like everyone that I know complaining like, where's the Switch version, when's the Direct? And so finally having this to where, yes, it's, you know, Persona 3, 4, and 5 for everyone except Stadia users. It's kind of nice to see Atlas putting other games on other platforms, and hopefully we see it the other way around, like getting SMT5 on PlayStation, Xbox, PC, somewhere that it runs at a higher frame rate than, 12.
Yeah, I mean, I have to admit, if anyone asked me the question, which would be ported to Switch first, Persona 5 Royal or the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, I would not have said Persona 5 Royal.
It's still a little baffling that the Pixel remasters are not on anything else yet, especially Switch.
I would say that there must be some kind of exclusivity deal in place, but like it's only on PC and mobile platforms. So it's not like they made a deal with Apple or something like that. It's a weird choice from Square Enix, but Square Enix makes all kinds of weird choices. And so does Atlas, but this is not one of the weird choices. This one is a no-brainer, and I look forward to hearing how Persona 5 Royal runs on the Nintendo Switch. I'm less interested to hear how Persona 3 Portable and Persona 4 Golden run on it. I suspect that the hardware is perfectly fine to run those two games, but 5 Royal, that'll be interesting.
It'll be fun, I hope.
Yeah. But you know what? I have been slagging the Switch and its graphic capabilities for a little while now in this Nintendo Direct news segment. And the reality is that there are a lot of games out there that for the Nintendo Switch that look absolutely gorgeous, creating incredible immersive worlds that really pull you in. And boy, you want to explore those ecosystems and kill all the creatures in said ecosystems. And that game that I was just talking about would be Monster Hunter Rise. This is a game that got released a few years ago. We have 2 reviews for it on the site. Both of them are written by you two. Des, you gave it a 90. Dom, you gave it a 92. You were both really big fans, and I know that you're both very big fans of the Monster Hunter series in general. So it must have been super exciting that the expansion just came out, and this is Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. So this is the DLC for Rise. From what I have heard, it is pretty much, it's kind of like a brand new game using the same mechanics as Rise, but it's like a new town, new story. Well, as much story as Monster Hunter games have, really. And this game has been, to say it's been positively received by both the fan base and by consumers is mild, because it has sold 2 million units thus far since its release a few days ago. And that is insanely impressive when you consider that you must own Rise already to, play this game. So that is, it's kind of an indication of just how passionate this fan base is. So yeah, it sounds it's continuing to capitalize on its rise in the mainstream that Monster Hunter has had for the last few years. And I've talked to both of you very, very briefly about Sunbreak, and it's terrible, right? I hear it's horrible.
Horrible for my sleep schedule, yeah.
Horrible for my time as well. It's like, get off work, play Monster Hunter, go to sleep, wake up, play Monster Hunter, go to work.
Think about what gear to get.
It's crazy because I'll be trying to sleep, and then in my head, I'll start seeing like great sword surge / combos, and that makes it harder to sleep because I'm like, no, that's wrong.
I'll be lying in bed and be like and still like thinking about if I use this armor set, or maybe get this charm, then I could run this. Then I could run these skills on my armor instead for this series, which might be better. Or like, yeah, It's just theory crafting in my head all the time.
Or the existential question of how many sharpening cycles do I actually need?
Well, let me ask a few questions about this. So, as I understand it, this is not like a DLC that you can just do whenever you want. This is you actually need to have played Monster Hunter Rise to get to the DLC. You can't just start it from the start, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep, it requires you to finish the main story, I think.
And in that sense, this game is, I would say, quote unquote, hard because it's an end game. It's a piece of end game content essentially. Where if you need to know what you are doing in order to advance and have fun with this game.
I don't know about hard, especially with Monster Hunter Rise compared to previous entries. It's been more accessible and easier to get into. And when I was looking at just reviewing my review and Dom's review, we both kind of lamented the difficulty or lack thereof in Rise. So it being a very easier game to get into, you have so many tools and options that'll help you get through it. They also provide what they call defender armor and weapons, so it's higher, stronger gear to help new players kind of get more acclimated with the systems and not have to worry about getting hit and killed in one hit. It's, I guess, one of my problems with Rise overall was just that it was too easy, but for people like myself who have been playing this series for 15 years, that's a complaint that I think just people like me and probably Dom are going to have. But any newcomer is probably going to have the time of their life and feel great just, pummeling these monsters, making new builds, seeing new scary creatures that can kill you in one hit if you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, I feel like in the base version of Rise, it was the players got a very noticeable upgrade in what they could do, especially compared to World, because they're given a lot of verticality and they're given a lot more defensive tools for the monster fights, but the monster fights themselves are still from World or I guess previous entries, even though I haven't played them, but from previous entries, which were still very much mostly ground-based attacks. Monsters can't really punish a lot of the new options given to the players. So previously in World, if you got knocked down, you just kind of had to accept your fate of whether the monster punching you to death. But in base Rise, you can wire bug, you can just zip out of it kind of. But so that was one of the reasons base Rise felt a little bit too easy, along with some weapons being kind of overtuned. But I feel Sunbreak does a pretty good job. A lot of the monsters in Sunbreak, I feel are very much adjusted to the new power level that the players have gotten in Rise. So Sunbreak definitely feels like a much more engaging experience.
So with Sunbreak, as they added new moves, monsters hit harder. It feels like they tuned their AI just a little bit to kind of react better to your moves, because with Rise, it feels like you're using next gen equipment, but the monster's still on the last gen.
Yeah, definitely.
And so being able to counter through attacks that I as a dual blade user normally should not be able to counter. It kind of felt unfair and unbalanced. But Sunbreak has, when I've been playing through it with a friend, there's been a lot of challenging fights. Some monsters put up less of a fight than others. Some go down, in 4 or 5 minutes still. But there's been some really interesting, I wouldn't say difficulty spikes, but nice little hills to where it feels oh, this monster is doing stuff that I've never seen before. Yeah. It's doing things that I didn't expect. One monster, for example, is Pyra Rachna Kadaki, which is the spider thing with lava. Yeah. In the base game, I remember it not really attacking behind itself as much. I could be wrong, but I noticed when I first fought it in Sunbreak that whenever I got behind it, it was ready to smash its, whatever you want to call that tail thing, down on top of me. So a lot of the monsters have new and interesting moves, and it feels like they kind of gave some of them the equivalent of the wire bug, what we have in a sense of where it's here's new mechanics that you as the player are going to have to figure out and counter. And some of them just might catch you by surprise. And before you know it, you're, being pushed in a cart back to the camp and embarrassing the other 3 hunters in your party.
Yeah, I feel a lot of the monsters in Sunbreak, once they become enraged, they start double tapping you. So when like in base Rise, like a lot of one of the things about Rise is that a lot of the weapon types, all of a sudden, they could just like straight up just square up against the monster and just counter a lot of their attacks. But in Rise, like the monsters, once they are enraged, they a lot of the moves have follow up as well. So even if you counter the first attack, you will get hit by the second one. So now it's no longer just, you know, haha, I play longsword and I have like 3 counters built into my weapon, so monsters can never hit me. But now it's actually like, oh, I have to actually react properly with the right move set.
And that's the one thing that I always wanted, is that I want the monsters to like counter my counter, or to challenge my defensive options. And that's always been really interesting, especially in Sunbreak, like you said, where, you know, they'll do a combo or a counter or another follow-up to something that you weren't expecting, like Tetranodon, the big sumo kappa platypus turtle thing. I think he had a grab in the base game, but the follow-ups that he has make you really kind of stay on your toes. And, you know, because once he grabs you, yes, you can get out, but he still might, you know, fling a rock at you or come charging at you right away. So it's been really interesting, a nice uptick in difficulty. And then speaking of weapons, one thing that I found really great is when I was looking at my review, I mentioned that the weapons already felt kind of perfect, and I had no idea just how much better the like switch skill swapping system that there is would make them feel. It's like opening up a whole new world and changing fights dynamically.
Oh yeah, the switch skill swapping is really nice. I've been using the longsword most of the time, and like there's a very clear there are 2 very clear like different longsword play styles now, and just having the flexibility of being able to switch between them is super nice, especially because now they're also adding skills that like encourage you to switch a lot between the different skill sets. Because so like there's a new armor skill where you switch between the different the switch skill sets that you have, you recover some HP. So yeah, I feel like the scroll system, the first time around, like when I first saw it, I was like, oh, I'm never going to use this. I'm just gonna stick with the one thing that is perfectly fine-tuned to my tastes and just never switch from that. But like that's not been the case at all. Like I've been switching between the scrolls a lot, and it feels good. It's very fluid. It doesn't really detract from the flow of the battle either, despite it having like a mini like hoo-ah like animation when you do it. It's still very smooth, and like there's a very easy dodge like added onto it as well right after. So it's, yeah, I was surprised by just how well implemented it is, despite it being a brand new feature.
And I guess for Jono and anyone who hasn't played the games before, the switch skills, you essentially have like 5 slots of moves that you can change to different moves. So you can kind of tailor your playstyle to be like, if you want to be more aggressive or more defensive or more aerial or more like, evasion based. With Sunbreak, they introduced a system to where you can have 2 loadouts. And so you can change any of those 5 moves to, certain moves within that button, but you can do it on the fly. So like for me, as I've been playing Greatsword a lot recently, which is a big, slow, heavy weapon, does a ton of damage, but when you miss, it really hurts. And so some monsters will get enraged and run all over the map or just zip back and forth, and they're really hard to hit. So with Greatsword, it's been really nice to swap to my different scroll and go for a more faster move set. Even though I'm doing less damage, I'm still getting more hits. So it's really nice and kind of changes the flow. It makes combat way more dynamic, way more interesting, and you never feel like, oh crap, the monster is running all over the place, there's no way I can hit it. It's you always have an option available, and that's what's kind of making the weapons, like, at least in some cases, feel like perfect and then some. Where with other ones where they felt maybe a little weaker, they're definitely brought up to, they bring the skill like floor and options you have available, kind of brings it all up.
Yeah, it really feels like every weapon can be used against every monster this time around. Like I see, like maybe not so much in base rides, but one thing I felt very clearly in World was that some weapons in certain monster matchups are just you're going to have a horrendous time. Like the hunt is going to take 30 minutes. You're going to burn through all your potions, and you're just going to want to like go back to your base and just switch weapons entirely and just like not even bother with it for like this hunt. But in Sunbreak, because of one, because of all the switch skills, and two, because you can switch between two different loadouts, like it really feels like every weapon has at least one thing in its arsenal that it can use quite effectively against basically whatever monster you're fighting against.
Yeah.
So you're never feeling like, oh, this is just a terrible matchup. This is just gonna be a terrible time for me. Like there's none of that, I feel.
Yeah, like every weapon feels viable. And then I guess, Jono, have you played any Monster Hunter or seen any Monster Hunter?
Seen Monster Hunter, not played.
What would you say, like, what's your impression of how the games go, just from what you've seen?
From my impression of the Monster Hunter series, it seems like it has a ridiculously tight and addictive gameplay loop, which is the classic, come up with set up your character, set up your party, come up with a plan, go out into the wilderness, wherever that is, find your prey, find the monster, which is essentially all monsters, at least the more popular ones are essentially all bosses, come up with a massive strategy to fight against this thing, fight, beat the monster, go back to town with the spoils of victory, repeat. That seems to me to be the gameplay loop that I've seen, and it seems to be a very satisfying one.
Yeah, and one of the best parts about Monster Hunter is that even though you're kind of doing the same thing in a sense over and over, you're building your gear, getting better weapons, going out hunting the monster, and it's just a huge, in a lot of cases, very like set piece almost kind of boss fight that can take, at least in World, up to like 45, almost 50 minutes. But the thing that's really great about the Monster Hunter games is that you have like two means of progression. You have like your gear and how you're getting better stuff as you kill the monsters. But then there's also that personal progression of you getting better, to where you fought this monster, you know its patterns, you know what it's going to do. You kind of have control over the battlefield. And for me, that's where you as the player kind of like level up and get better, to where before you know it, that 45-minute fight, you're knocking it down in, 3 minutes flat. Like It's a really interesting thing. And it is one of the most rewarding games that I've played in a long time, just any Monster Hunter in general. And it really feels like the perfect way to lose track of 600 hours.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let me ask this then. And I realize that this question is going to be extremely difficult to answer because of the way these games are set up. How many additional hours of content and gameplay do you think that Sunbreak adds to Rise? Realizing, of course, that this is the kind of game which easily hundreds upon hundreds of hours can be invested into this to refine your skills, to fight monsters. It's just fun. But in general, how much would you say has been added to Rise?
I mean, with how Rise is structured, I feel Rise also has a much better, it's much better structured in the way that it unfolds its content. There's a lot of like hidden content and content that I just, in general, I feel it is much better paced than Iceborne was, which I feel Iceborne was very, like the base Iceborne was pretty meh, but then like the post content updates for Iceborne were amazing. So, but for just base Sunbreak, I'd say minimum like 150 hours if you're not like hunting for like perfect monster time, like hunt times.
Yeah, I guess it kind of depends on what you want to do as well. Like if you're just the kind of person who plays these games solo, just, play it, hit credits, and then drop it, you can probably get like maybe 40 to 60 hours out of it. I'm looking at my Steam play time, and it says 36.2 hours in the past 2 weeks, and I think it came out on Thursday.
Yeah.
Always fun to look at the Steam play time and be like, that's impossible.
That's my badge of shame.
There's no way that's the case. Oh, no.
Right. It's even worse when I look at like my world playtimes on PS4 and Steam, because you put it all together and it's like 800 hours, and it's like, where did all that time go? Oh, right, I was slaying monsters. With this one, I would say, yeah, you'd probably get about 150. What's also interesting is like they have these new things called like follower quests, to where you can have AI come with you. And what's really neat about those is that it kind of recreates the multiplayer experience, sort of. So for people who just kind of want to, do some solo stuff, get some new weapons, get some new story content, you can go out there with AI, like on top of your dog and your cat, which also reminds me, like they can also join you in multiplayer for some quests. So
neat.
what's been really funny is that if you're playing with 4 people, so you have 4 hunters and then their palico or palamute, which is the little cat or dog helper, then you have the NPC who's coming with you as well, and they have their own dog or cat. So you can go into some battles and it is literally 10 versus 1. And it's essentially like a raid fight from, like World of Warcraft.
Yeah.
It's really chaotic, seeing cats and dogs flying all over the place, lightning bolts and bombs exploding, and like, people with gun lances just rocket boosting across the screen. It's a really fantastic experience, especially when you get that full party plus NPC and that poor monster who, despite being outnumbered, can probably crush all of you in one blow and embarrass the whole party.
The best is when the 4 human control players all bring 2 traps each, so the monster is trapped for like 20 seconds as you just wail on it. Well, unless it's an elder dragon, but
and then you see the poor guy put down a trap on the elder dragon and then wonder why it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the monsters for a second, because this game adds quite a few. Are they new or returning monsters, or is it a mix of the two?
It's a mix.
So what would be some of your favorite returning monsters?
I mean, I guess it was revealed. I guess Gormagala is, or I've only ever seen footage of Gormagala. I didn't play any of the games where Gormagala was in it, but Gormagala is a fan favorite, and it definitely is like one of the more interesting dragon designs as well, because it wears its wings like a cape throughout most of the fight. So I was very excited to be able to fight him. And I don't know, in general, for the record, I feel Sunbreak has like 1,000 times better base monster roster than Iceborne's base roster. Putting that out there as well.
I would agree for the most part, although the lack of Glavenus really makes me sad, because that is one of my favorite fights, and like one of the most hype battles that I've ever had playing a Monster Hunter game is like narrowly dodging this like fiery tail sword. But I also agree that like the Sunbreak monsters are really great so far. And one thing that I've noticed as I've been playing is that there's this very, like, I guess for like lack of a better term, like Castlevania kind of feeling to it. So like the flagship monster, or the one on the cover, Malzeno, he's very vampiric looking. But then you have like Lunagaron, who is like this wolf that, after he charges up and gets enraged, he stands up on his hind legs and he's more like a werewolf. So it's been really interesting seeing like the kind of vampire and werewolf and like Eastern European fantasy, like tropes mixing in. And so with like Gormagala or Magala or however you say it, one thing that was really interesting to me is like the way that he does wear those wings like a cape. It kind of reminds me of, have you ever played the Kingdom Hearts games?
I haven't played them, unfortunately.
Well, I'm sure you've seen Beauty and the Beast.
Yeah, of course.
So the way that he kind of runs with his cape reminds me of a scene from like, Beast, like running through the castle with like his cape wrapped around him. It was a really interesting like visual flair that kind of stood outside of the like, vampire werewolf aesthetic that we have, but it still kind of had that like, creepy monsters skulking through the castle. And like, speaking of castles, I'm really in love with the like Citadel map, and especially having played Elden Ring a couple months ago, actually tackling that map, it was interesting to kind of get those like crazy like Dark Souls, Elden Ring vibes, just kind of exploring around this like ruined town, as well as the next map, the jungle coming back. It was really nice seeing that, especially seeing it, brought up in like HD 15 years later.
I just feel like the maps in Sunbreak are also, I feel like they definitely take advantage, or they've learned to work around the fact that Rise just, it can't have a world quite as lush and vibrant as World, simply due to hardware limitations. But instead of that, they really made the gameplay of the maps, like exploring the verticality, the different layers. Like, I feel like they definitely really dug into that aspect of Rise for the map design in Sunbreak, and it definitely pays off. Like, even if Yeah, like it's not quite as much of a walk in the like you're actually walking through nature like in world. Rise's maps or Sunbreak's maps are definitely they're just super fun to traverse, I feel, this time around.
One thing that I really loved in World was, like you said, the kind of walk through nature where it really felt like you were in that ecosystem, and every monster that you found like really felt like they lived there. And even in Iceborne, is every creature that you found felt like, you know, that was their home and you were the one, you know, kind of, I guess for lack of a better term, like invading. And in Rise, some monsters felt like they kind of belonged and some monsters didn't. They felt like visitors, like Rathian and Rathalos being in the shrine. Like that never really felt right.
I believe the technical term is invasive species.
Yeah, so we, the humans, are the invasive species. But one thing I like in Sunbreak is that these monsters like Garen Gollum and Lunagoran and Gormagala feel like they live in these maps, or like one of my favorite monsters, the Daimyo Hermitar. Like it's a giant crab who wears the skull of usually a dead monster as its like shell, and you find him on the beach and you battle him and he's digging through the sand, and it feels like he lives there, and that's something I really appreciate in Sunbreak. And it does feel like they took a lot of feedback from World and Iceborne and Rise as well, and kind of put it all together in Sunbreak, because even the cutscenes feel like they're straight out of Iceborne in terms of like direction and what happens. So it's almost the perfect Monster Hunter game. But if we could just get like, you know, how gorgeous Iceborne looked with how great Sunbreak runs and all of these traversal options, I feel like we would have a Monster Hunter game that I'll never be able to shut up about.
That's a hard agree right there.
What I have heard about Monster Hunter, the Monster Hunter series, is that realistically speaking, the story is just kind of there. Like we were talking a lot about the gameplay loop and, you know, going out and coming back and, you know, coming up with new weapons and sharpening it. The story of this game, is there anything there to really draw you in, or is it just simply an excuse to provide a new locale, a new ecosystem to explore, essentially?
The story is almost always the same in Monster Hunter games, is that there's monsters, they're a part of the ecosystem, you're a part of the ecosystem, something comes in to disrupt it that is not you or them, and it's kind of enraging them, and you know, it's kind of a more, you know, we have to stop nature from destroying itself, but we are also part of nature kind of story. I don't think Sunbreak does much to change that. I mean, I haven't beat it yet, but it does more interesting stuff with the characters. And so the story is thankfully skippable this time if you really just don't care.
Big like, plus.
Yeah, one of the worst parts of Monster Hunter World and Iceborne is that when you, like, let's say the three of us were playing together, we all have to go into our own separate missions, view our cutscenes, and then two of us have to back out and then join one of the others.
That seems clunky.
It's the clunkiest system ever, and it absolutely sucks trying to get new people into it, because you're just like, oh no, you just keep watching, we'll quit out and we'll join you. With Rise, you can really just kind of skip it if you really don't care. And the cutscenes, thankfully, are much shorter overall, or they take place at the end of hunts. So you're not holding anybody up. It's nice. Like the story's just kind of there, in my opinion. But if you're not feeling it, just skip it. Who cares? But there are some interesting characters, and that's been the fun part, and how they're kind of letting some of these more eccentric characters shine and kind of have the stage for a little while. But how do you feel about the story? Because I think you beat it, right?
Yeah. I mean, the story pretty much follows a lot of the same beats from Iceborne, but one of the big pluses in the story for me is that A, there's no handler, and B, the character who replaces the handler pretty much, who is Dame Fiorine, is super well. One, she's badass, and two, she comes with you on hunts sometimes, and she's actually like super helpful during those hunts as well. So big ups to Capcom for not having a useless AI sidekick.
Yeah, and Fiorine's character has been really interesting to kind of see how she interacts with people, especially how she interacts with Bahari, the scientist, or the very terse and, you know, man of few words, Admiral
Gallius.
Yeah, and it's interesting how you can kind of see how his demeanor is rubbing off on her, like the more time she spends around him. Like she's becoming more terse and very flat and matter of factly. And then when she does kind of lose her stuff, you can kind of see her true self kind of shine through, and that's been really interesting, at least in terms of like character development and story stuff.
But yeah, the story in Rise is kind of, it's whatever. It is what it is.
It's superfluous to the overall experience, basically, which is the gameplay loop.
And watching these huge spectacle fights, I feel like definitely Sunbreak as a base expansion has so many more amazing like wow moments that are like actually also fun to play as well. For instance, like in Iceborne, I remember one of the moments was there's a monster variant called the Shrieking Legiana, and Legiana is like it's like a bird basically. But the Shrieking version in Iceborne was like, the first time you see it, it's like, wow, it's icy now. It has like slightly different visuals, but then you fight it and all it does is scream and fly, so you can't hit it half the time. So that wasn't fun. But I feel in Sunbreak, not only does it have similar like wow and a lot of spectacle moments, but the fights themselves are also much, much better tuned this time around. Feel.
It sounds like a lot of fun.
It is.
It is.
Absolutely.
Which is why this game it's one of those series that it is a rising star. Each game seems to be doing progressively better than the one before it. And if Sunbreak is any indication, that trend will be continuing. And I believe Solosi was the one who told me this, that the Monster Hunter games are produced on there's a cycle where there are always two games in development. One is the console development team, and the other is the handheld development team.
Mm-hmm.
So this would be the handheld development team. So next up would be the Return to World Iceborne development team. And I mean, who knows when we'll see those games? This game is out probably, so maybe we'll see something at not E3 or actual E3 next year. Who knows?
Yeah, we might see an announcement next year, I imagine, around E3. But
yeah, I could see it around like June
timeline as World. But
yeah.
I feel like Rise is or Sunbreak is gonna have plenty of content to tide people over for a while. So,
well, is there anything else you two would like to say about Sunbreak before we move into the discussion question?
Everything that I've seen and played through on Sunbreak has given me a lot of hope for the future. It's like I said in my initial review, and I believe Dom said it as well. Like, if you haven't played a Monster Hunter game before, this is like the perfect place to jump in, because there's so much like new tools and mechanics and quality of life changes that make it a really pleasant experience, that make veteran hunters' lives easier. And also it's a lot easier to be onboarded. And so I would recommend it to anybody who's like even got a passing interest in it, because you never know, you might find something that you and your friends can just go crazy on for like 300, 400, 500 hours. And I'm also looking forward to what they do with the next Monster Hunter, as I like to call it. How there's Super Mario World and Super Mario Galaxy. I always like to think of the next Monster Hunter as like Monster Hunter Galaxy, in a sense of like, what new stuff can they add?
This actually nicely transitions into this week's discussion question, which is not for me because it is very specific about this game series. I'm curious, based on Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak, what would you like to see in the next Monster Hunter game, or in future Monster Hunter titles? What would you like to see them take from this, or what new features would you like to see them introduce into the next entry in the series?
So for me, what I would like to see in the future of Monster Hunter, and I'm hopeful that we get it in whatever the sequel to World is, would be more like open world experience to it, to where they tried it in Monster Hunter World and Iceborne, where you can have like 16 hunters in one lobby. It would be more interesting to me to have like 16 hunters in one map, to where they can have parties of 4, kind of like an MMO in a sense, to where like maybe Group A is out hunting a Anjanath, or Group B is out hunting a Rathalos. And if like some event pops up, then maybe both groups can kind of converge and tackle this group thing together. It'd be more interesting to see some like, not so much survival elements to it, but if you just load into this like massive, almost open world MMO style map, to just like, I'm just going to go gather stuff. And if I see a monster, I'll attack it, or I'll call for help, or, I'll contact my guild. I'd like to see just to kind of make it more of a kind of like living, breathing space with more people in it. Because while Sunbreak does have like better multiplayer options, for friends, it feels like you lose something in not having a lobby of 16 people just, talking about what they just did or what they're planning to do or going on raids together. So I would just like to see kind of some expansion of the world in Monster Hunter, along with the mechanics that we've gotten from Rise and Sunbreak.
I mean, there has been a Monster Hunter MMO, right?
Yeah, Monster Hunter Frontier. I believe it was PC and Xbox, and I don't think it ever came to the West. It may have had an English version, I believe, in Korea. I could be wrong, though.
Yeah, and since then it has been discontinued, so that's on the way out. It seems like it's a series that is in many ways ready-made for a MMORPG experience.
Yeah, and Monster Hunter Frontier has also kind of been largely ignored by Capcom as like, oh, that's something the other teams did. We don't want anything to do with it. So with Sunbreak, they actually brought a monster from Frontier into the roster. So it's kind of a nice acknowledgement of like, yes, we see that thing exists, and we know there are like monsters that people love from that, sub-series. So it's kind of nice to see that acknowledgement and bring over stuff. And I hope we get more things, because like Frontier had these crazy weapons designs like boomerangs and all sorts of like experimental weapons that would be really exciting to see in a new like huge, flagship Monster Hunter game.
This idea of an open world is really interesting to me. I think that having not played Monster Hunter, but having played a game that features extremely large creatures living in the land, Horizon Zero Dawn and Forbidden West, the machines, which are based off animals, just live on the land, and they live within their own ecosystems. And sometimes you can come across ones that are just, very, very benign, but other times you can come across massive monsters, machines that are just completely out of your range. Now, I understand that for the most part, the machines in the Horizon games are not to the same what's sort of complexity as the ones here, because this is essentially, it's almost like a boss rush game, whereas those are just enemies. But that idea of having a giant open world and just going around in it and finding the monsters living in these various ecosystems, that seems like it has some mileage to it, where it's an open world would be, to me, logical.
Yeah, so like open world or open zone, like just some huge sandbox map that's kind of larger than what we have now. I think that would be really exciting. And like you said, where there's the machines in Horizon where they kind of exist in these ecosystems and their own biomes, it would be really interesting to just walk from base camp up a mountain to go to the snowy top to go fight that ice monster that you need the extremely rare gem from.
I guess what I want is kind of the opposite direction of Des, in that not so much that I want like the games to be smaller or anything, but one of the things I really enjoyed about Rise was how it introduces verticality to the gameplay, both in terms of like just the combat and the map design overall. And as a big Dark Souls fan, I feel this is like a prime stepping stone in that direction of map design, with like lots of shortcuts, a lot more I guess what I want is more intricate vertical map design with like more with possibly like elevators or like shortcuts to unlock. And because I feel what's one of the most exciting parts about exploring the maps in Rise as well is when you zip up to a spot where you honestly didn't think you could go to before, and then you find and then you just go down this rabbit hole, like different paths and like twists and not shortcuts, but like paths and like just branches in the pathway. And for instance, in the jungle map, I found myself all of a sudden in like a huge underground like temple almost, and that was one of the wow moments for me while playing through Sunbreak. So I wish they would continue with this kind of map design that they've touched upon here with Rise and Sunbreak.
I feel like if we combined both of what we want, we would get something like a Monster Hunter Elden Ring, where there's like crazy verticality, both up and down, with like a sprawling landscape. That would be kind of like a dream project for me.
Definitely, yeah.
And then as you were talking about, not knowing if you'd be able to make it up a cliff or something, when playing Rise, it seemed like you had to break the the 10 or 5, 10, 15 years of muscle memory and just memory of like, oh, I can't go up that wall. It's an invisible wall. And then sure enough, you just wire bug up and you're ninja running all the way up to the side of a mountain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I hope that the next title certainly takes that verticality and expands on it. It would be foolish in my mind not to, because it seems to be one of the big innovations of this series that people are really, really enjoying. And it certainly does create a more immersive environment to explore when you are not limited by, I guess, a hill.
Mm-hmm. Or just like, just landscapes that's there as set dressing, but like not actually available for the players to do more than just gawk at.
It's nice that every map essentially becomes a Ultimate Ninja Warrior course, and you're kind of seeing how fast you can get to where the monster's at in as few jumps as possible.
An interesting idea. I'm not sure if this would require a lot of thinking, but if they were to really lean into the idea of the ecosystem, and the idea that maybe some monsters are natural predators of certain other creatures, and that if you clear a map of, let's say, one of the big predators, there will be a mild explosion of their prey in that area, which could cause a variety of other problems. Like, it'd be interesting if your actions could have a direct impact on the ecosystem that surrounds you.
Mm-hmm. That'd be really interesting, especially if there's an apex predator and you go and tackle that just to get it out of the way so that you can get more of, what's on the food chain below it, maybe a smaller, less aggressive monster, but one that you need a lot of parts from. So it would be interesting to just take care of the problem so that you have more farming options available.
Yeah, shape your environment.
Yes, that would be really interesting.
Agreed. Yeah, because the hunts, even for apex predators, it's still very gamey. Like, you just set up the hunt, and then you spawn the map, and the map spawns the monster. So it'd be interesting if that was more integrated into the ecosystem.
Yeah, fantasy and alien ecosystems are one of my favorite things about video games nowadays. And the more thought that's put into them and how these systems interact with each other, the more immersive the world. So I feel like if they were to put a little bit more thought into immersing the player in that ecosystem, even more so than they are now, that could be an interesting direction to go. But who knows if they will or not.
Hopefully they do.
Well, I want to thank both of you for coming out and talking about Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak at length. I know that it was certainly a challenge for both of you to talk about this game, considering that all you want to do is go back and play more of the game.
Speaking of.
Later, everyone.
Every moment spent talking is a moment I'm not hunting.
Exactly. So I will let both of you go and allow you to get back to your respective hunts. So yeah, this was the 246th episode of Random Encounter. We have lots of other ones. Please check our back catalog. There are lots of talks in there about Monster Hunter games. As a matter of fact, we had one a couple months ago where we talked about Rise. We also have some other podcasts on the site. We have Retro Encounter, which is back after a break. We just finished talking about the very first Suikoden game, which was a two-parter where we broke down the game and how it lays a foundation that is really built upon in future titles, especially the immediate sequel, Suikoden 2. And also, if you enjoy listening to a completely baffled Jono, I highly recommend you listen to the quiz show episode of Retro Encounter, which came out last Thursday. It was an awesome time. I had so much fun participating in this year's quiz episode. If you have listened to the ones in the past, you know the amount of insane work that Solosi puts into these quiz show episodes. So if you're looking for a good time and you want to challenge your own knowledge of RPGs, give it a listen. We also have Rhythm Encounter, which is our music podcast. The last episode was Lunar Encounter, which I had a hell of a time editing, because in a good way. Because I mean, the Lunar series is one of the most important RPG series to RPG fan for a number of reasons, of which they talk about in the podcast. And it is a classic series with some really, really great music, and not just the song that you remember, which is Boat Song. Incidentally, if you like Boat Song, I recommend you check out the karaoke episode of Rhythm Encounter. Oh, God. Coming up next on Rhythm Encounter, we're going to be doing Square Dance, which is going to be focusing on strategy RPGs, specifically ones that are in the grid system. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random Encounter, you can fire me off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. I would absolutely love to hear from you. If you have any ideas for future episodes or suggestions for discussion questions, please fire them off to me. If you'd like to send me an email, you can do so at jlogan@rpgfan.com, or please come find me on Twitter at Jono_Logan. But I am not the only person on this podcast with an online presence. Des, where can we find you online?
Luckily, for my health, not Twitter.
Smart.
But you can find me...
Smart.
You can find me in the RPG Fan Discord. You can just see my little name there, click Des, and then you can message me. I allow messages without friend requests. That's probably a bad idea, but oh well. And I'd be happy to talk about RPGs and, any other topics that might be fun.
Like Monster Hunter.
Kind of like Monster Hunter.
And you, Dom, where can we find you online?
You can also find me on Discord. Feel free to ping me at dhkenny on the RPG Fan server.
Cool. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends, and you can help us get the word out there about it. And you can rate us on iTunes or your podcast player of choice. Again, I would like to thank both of you for joining me this week. I would like to thank everyone out there listening. And whatever you're playing, have fun.